Okay, guys, let's get started then. I think we are all running out of battery at the end of the term. I don't know about you guys, but I'm really looking forward when this term is over. Probably you're looking even more forward when the exam is over. And I'm looking even more forward when I finish grading your exams. So we are at the last limp here, and I think the microphone sort of died now as well, but anyway, but hopefully you can hear me. So this is our last lecture of this course. First of all, let me mention we had the take-home test last weekend. Well, actually, there was one mistake on my side. So one question was incorrect. The answer was incorrect. So the maximum possible number of points that you could get was not 200, but 190. So I will account for that. And actually, we had a couple of people having 190 points. So congrats, guys. You know, Constanze, Tom, Andrew, and Ryan. That was great. Of course, it will be reflected in the grades. Okay, so let me move on. And now, for the last lecture, I basically brought these three things with me. I want to talk a little bit about exam particulars. You might have some questions about how the exam is going to look like and so on. So I just want to briefly touch upon that. Then I brought, basically the list of stuff that you guys asked me to review. So I'm going to have a look at that and might mention a few things around that. And then lastly, I prepared a little quiz for us. I don't know if you've ever played that, but if you have, it's actually quite lots of fun. And actually, it gives you an idea about how far you are with your preparation as well. And you can replay these quizzes, and I'm going to put the link on Blackboard. So give this one more try. No, I think we'll just have to live with it as it is. Okay, so let me get started with exam particulars. When is the exam? Well, actually, I looked it up this morning. It is on the 15th of May. I used to have gotten that piece of information. It's happening at 12 o'clock. So actually, I won't be around on that day, but most likely Roland will show up and have a quick look at you guys. But I won't be there on the day. Okay, this is actually how the exam looks like. Actually, this is the exam. Yeah. So just the first page, though. I don't have the second page here. It is a 2-hour-long exam, and you'll have to answer 3 out of 4 questions. But I'll come back to that in a second. So if you have some questions around the whole thing about the exam or about the topics and so on, you know, I keep reiterating this in my courses. The biggest resource that you guys have are each other. Yeah, that's just, I'm not just saying this is actually how it is. And long after you've forgotten about me or about other, I don't know, professors sitting here telling you stuff, you remember the people sitting next to you and you will still draw on them. So I still draw on my network that I built up during my times as a student. So that's very important. And it can really help in preparation for an exam as well. If you have a question or you feel that you are not alone, actually you can just bounce back some ideas or not. Yeah. I'm sorry for the acoustics, but the microphone just died and I don't know. University just sucks sometimes. Yeah. Anyway. So questions. As I said, ask your peers. There's a discussion forum on Blackboard as well, where you can ask questions to each other, and you can also feel free to respond. Please feel free to respond to the questions of each other. If there are some administrative issues, get in touch with our undergraduate administrator, with Deirdre. I usually don't know the answer about these things anyway, so Deirdre is the person to get in touch with there. However, if there are any other issues that you are uncomfortable with posting on Blackboard, feel free to get in touch with me. However, I'm traveling around quite a bit, so I don't know, I might not be as quickly available, but I will do my best to respond as quickly as I can. Okay, I don't know why I have that here. Okay, this is sort of just a general idea. So at the end, you'll get different questions, and for each question, there will be up to 25 points, including 5 points for overall quality of writing and structure. So I do value a well-written response, right? That means, is it structured, and is it written in good English? Does it make sense? On the top of that, I usually award extra points as well. So if you provide something that goes beyond what was asked in the question, I want to value that. Yeah, so it makes sense from your point of view. If you know more, then write it down. Yeah, because that's something where I can give you points for. If you don't write it down, I cannot give you points for it. So I want to have that opportunity in here. Just keep calm and play fair. Well, to be honest, I don't even know how you would cheat in this exam anyway, but you guys are innovative, but at the end of the day, you're just shooting yourself in the foot with these kind of things. So just don't do it. Don't risk to get caught by the invigilators. It's really just not worth the effort. Okay, let me talk a little bit about the timing of this exam. As I said, it's going to be a 2-hour-long exam, and that should be plenty of time. It's actually, to be honest, I think you could easily do that in 1 hour. But hey, we have a 2-hour slot, so you can use the 2-hour slot if you want to. But keep an eye on the time. But normally, with answering 3 questions that I give you, you should have more than plenty of time to do that. Okay, I asked you to answer 3 questions. And with 3, I mean 3. And one of the easiest way you can screw up this exam is by just answering 1, yeah, or just answering 2, because then I just cannot give you any points for anything on the 3rd question, right? So even if you don't know much about a particular question, give your best, because that gives me an opportunity to give you points. You won't get negative points, but if you don't give me anything, I just have to give you 0 points. So that's just how it is. So answer 3 questions. You won't get any points for answering 4 questions. If you answer 4 questions, I will only consider the first 3 questions that you answered. Yeah? So choose your 3 questions. As I said, you can choose 3 out of 4. I know that's not a lot of choice, yeah? But that's just how it is right now. But you only have to answer 3 questions. Yeah? So I don't give you lots of questions here. So choose the questions that you answer and answer the ones that you are most comfortable with. Okay, briefly about the grading of the whole thing. As I already mentioned, up to 25 points for each question, including 5 points for general writing and structure. Well, part of that is also, well, not that you get any points for that, but it's really, if I cannot read what you write, I cannot give you any points for it either. And that's the quickest way to get me put off on this. Just write in such a way that I cannot decipher it, and then I cannot give you any points for it. So I'm going to give my best. I'm going to give this a fair try, but you would do yourself a favor when you write in a readable fashion. Don't write in any weird language. Write in a language that I can understand. So please write in English. Actually, I would be fine correcting German as well, but any other language, let's not give it a try. Okay. I don't know what I meant here. Anyway, so far about the exam particulars. Do you guys have any questions about the particulars of the exam that I just outlined? Yeah? How much should you write for each question? My honest answer, as much as you can, because that kind of as many points as I can give you for that. Yeah? But if you feel you answered everything, then that's fine too. Yeah? But just by default, if you write more, there's a higher chance that there's something else that I find in there that I can give you a point for. Any other question? Okay, so we're good on the... So strange, this seems to work. This is just fucked up. Anyway. Okay, so let me get started a little bit with revision or advice on how you can approach this exam. First of all, what I'm going to show you now, these are sort of like just so that you get a feeling for the style of what you can expect. So these are sort of like, let's say, 2 example questions that I have here now. Let me emphasize that these are not exam questions, these are example questions, so that you get a feeling for how the questions will be in the exam. So for example, the first one, why does the aggregate not always tell you about the individuals? Describe Simpson's paradox and give 3 examples where it matters. So if I would grade that question, at the end, I'm going to, as I did for the individual assignment as well, I'm going to have sub-points for different things. So in this case, I don't know, I haven't thought about it, but probably you would get some points for answering the first thing. Why does the aggregate not always tell you about the individuals? That would be a certain fraction. Then, I don't know, probably some more, maybe 5 points for that. And then maybe, another 5 points for describing the Simpsons paradox, and then another 5 points each for one of the 3 examples, in a way. So, I don't know, this is now so that you think about how I'm going to approach these things. So really read the question carefully, because for each one of the things that I ask you to do, you'll get points. And if you don't do that thing, then I cannot tick that box for you on that question. Or the second question, describe at least 4 components of analytical sociology according to the definition given by Manso. So in this case, let's say again, if there would be 25 points in total, 5 points I said for structure and writing, that leaves, 4 components. So if you 4 components would be up to 5 points each. Maybe I would give you 1 point for mentioning one correctly, or 2 points and 3 points for describing it. So maybe this is sort of how I would approach this. Okay, so these are example questions, and how you respond to that? Well, respond to that in an essay-style format. So the more structure that is, the more points I can give you on that as well. Okay, so how can you prepare for the exam? Well, obviously the best way to start preparing for the exam is to revisit the lectures. So the lectures are relevant for this. And you have access to all the lecture slides and even the audio video of the lectures. So to be honest, you have no excuse on that front. You can rewind everything that I ever said, which is scary because it totally exposes me. And I know, I think I'm probably the only one who does this in the whole college, as I'm aware of. A lot of people are very afraid of this, but hey, I think it really helps you. So make use of that. You have access to all the videos and to all the lecture materials. So nothing that will be in the exam will come as a surprise. So there's nothing that you will not have seen, nothing you will not have heard about before. Okay, so we have the lecture slides and the videos and everything. What else do we have? Well, actually, most of the lectures were based on some readings. And these were readings that we had key readings, required readings. Not every lecture has a required reading, but that doesn't mean that these lectures don't matter, right? But the required readings, they definitely matter. So most lectures were based on some readings that you were supposed to read before the lectures. So if you kept up with that, and hopefully, the take-home tests forced you to keep up with that a little bit. So it shouldn't be too overwhelming now. If you've done the take-home tests, and that's sort of why I put them in there, so that actually it forced you to actually engage with the readings before it's too late, and before we are all freaking out the weekend before the exam. So if you kept up with the readings, it will be much easier for you to revisit this material now. If you didn't do that, well, you better get started with the readings. You have a lot to catch up, especially the required readings. Okay, well, one disclaimer in one of the very first lectures, I fooled you a little bit. I had you read a text by Alan Sokal, Transgressing the Boundaries Towards a Transformative Hermeneutics of Quantum Gravity, which is actually complete bullshit. So I used this article as an example to show you how beautiful but how much bullshit one can write. And that analytical sociology is the opposite of that. We try to be very clear and very precise. So at the time I said that you have to read that text, but that text is not going to be relevant for the exam, obviously. So this is not exam relevant. However, this lecture is very relevant for the exam. This was the very first lecture about what is analytical sociology. This is a course in analytical sociology, an exam about analytical sociology. So it's very important that you are aware of what is analytical sociology. And I talked about some other texts. For example, I don't know, the text that I talked most about was actually the first one in the further readings list here, the Manso 2014 text. Okay. So much about that. Next, I had asked you about which kind of questions you would want me to revisit. Some examples of what came up. Let me, I don't want to spend too much time on this because I want to get to the quiz. Broken glass theory, or actually it's called broken window theory. Broken window theory was this idea, it comes from criminology, that if one window is being broken, then people are more likely to throw in another window. It's about the spread of disorder or the spread of crime, about the contagiousness of crime. And in that context, we talked extensively about the experiments by Kaiser et al., the science paper where they studied exactly that. Like how does disorder spread? In their case, they looked at different versions of that, but one was, like, remember the flyers attached to the bicycles, and then, there was graffiti at the wall, why there was a sign that there was no graffiti, that was the experimental treatment of the whole thing. And then actually what they found out that people were more likely to throw down the flyer on the floor to violate a norm when there was graffiti at the wall, compared to the same situation when there was no graffiti at the wall, keeping in mind that there was a sign that there shouldn't be graffiti. So by violating one norm, it was called the contextual norm, it was more likely that another norm, a target norm, would be violated as well. So that we talked about that in that context, and there were a couple of other experiments in that paper which were very interesting, but in a very similar fashion. Okay, another topic that came up, Colemans Boat. Colemans Boat is a schema for making an explanation. It's this idea that we have macro-level phenomena that we ultimately want to explain. And as sociologists, we want to relate them to other macro-level phenomena. For example, we have capitalism that we want to explain. And then, actually Max Weber came along and suggested, okay, maybe we can explain it with Protestantism. And then this is sort of like a macro relationship right now. But then Coleman suggested, hang on, in order to make macro level explanations, we should consider the individuals that are involved. That means from the macro level, we should go down to the individual level. Sometimes this is called a situational mechanism that leads from the macro level to the micro level. And it basically looks at how do individuals experience macro level conditions for themselves. So in terms of Protestantism, this would lead to I need to have a certain Protestant ethic. If I adhere to that macro level situation, then individuals behave. Often this is sort of also related at the time, it was called methodological individualism. As individuals act, individuals are at the center of what's happening in life. Of course, institutions and so on matter, but institutions themselves don't behave. They don't act. Action are individuals. So, and individuals act within these institutions, within these social contexts. And then in the Coleman Boat, in the next schema, we are at the micro level, and then these micro level conditions for individuals lead to individuals behaving in a certain way. In the case of Protestantism, this would lead to an ascetic lifestyle, because this would be like what predestination theory, which means that I'm chosen by God, would suggest to show that I've been selected. So that basically is an individual action component in there. Individuals act based on their experience of the world, which is from their point of view. And then when individuals act, this sort of changes the broader situation for others, the social context for others, and that's sort of where we have like the last link going up again. Sometimes that's called a transformational mechanism or an aggregation mechanism. Like what happens if many individuals behave in a certain way, and how does it change the macro level conditions, which then in turn change the world for other individuals, how they perceive their objective environment, how they perceive it subjectively, how they behave, and how they change the environment for others, and so on. That's Colemans Boat. It's essentially about the macro and the micro level, and about going through a situational mechanism, then an action mechanism to get from the micro to the other micro, and then a transformational mechanism to get from the micro behavior up to the macro outcomes again. So that's Colemans Boat. Another thing that came up, people asked about segregation. Obviously we had a couple of lectures on segregation. I think we had 3 lectures on segregation. So obviously that was a big topic. Yeah? And with segregation, the key for you to understand is the segregation process. That's this notion we talked about. I gave you some examples about how first I refuted a common sense theory, which would be that segregation is the outcome of individual preferences alone. Segregation, the separation of individuals in distinct parts of social life. I remember there was a map of New York, which is crazily segregated. Blacks live in one neighborhood, Hispanics live in other neighborhoods, whites live in other neighborhoods, and so on. Yeah? That's sort of what we mean with segregation. And segregation can be at a residential level, like where people live, but segregation can also be at the school level. I think I might have shown you an example of how segregated schools in Ireland are. There's an amazing map that I came across with, which actually shows you that I think 80 or 90% of the foreigners that live in Ireland go to only 20% of the schools in Ireland. So it's not separated out equally, but foreigners go to some schools where native Irish people go to other schools. This is segregation at schools. Segregation can also be at the workplace or in occupation segregation. Yeah? Then the question is, how can we explain these things? But obviously segregation, that's a macro level outcome. Yeah? That's a social phenomena that we have. The world is segregated. That's a macro level outcome. And then the idea is to explain that through individuals that live in that world and their behaviors and their interactions. And then a naive explanation would be, or a common sense theory would be, to say that the world is segregated because people are racists. Yeah? Unfortunately, some people are racists. Yeah? But hopefully I showed you in this class that segregation as the macro level outcome can come about even when people are tolerant. And that's sort of why this whole distinction between micro and macro is so important, because the macro level outcomes, you cannot immediately deduce from that what are the micro level individuals doing in that case. Yeah? This is now, so, and I showed you that this common sense theory, if it would be all about preferences, then certain things would have to be true. Yeah? For example, that in areas where people are more tolerant than in others, that there is less segregation. But I showed you in the context of the US that even though the south of the US is less tolerant than the north of the US, there is an equal amount of segregation, at least for the data that I showed you, which was from the 1940s to the 1970s. So that sort of defies this explanation. Then there's another thing that I showed you, which is that if in certain areas people become more tolerant over time, that then segregation should decrease. But again, when we looked at the data from the 1940s up to the 1960s and so on, there was an increase in tolerance, but segregation levels remain constant. So again, that kind of doesn't fly with this argument that it's all about individual preferences. Yeah? So instead, there seems to be something else that is happening. And this is sort of where I introduced the segregation process, which goes back to one of the key readings, not just that we had for this lecture, but also for this whole course in general. That's the key reading by Thomas Schelling on segregation. It is on the required reading list as well. Yeah? So that's a very important reading. And in that one he outlines, the guy got the Nobel Prize at the end of the day, so he kind of knows what he's talking about. And it was very innovative at the time. He didn't win the Nobel Prize for this, but for other stuff, he's one of the cleverest guys that you can ever meet. Yeah? I think I told you the story where I was standing next to Thomas Schelling once, right? Did I tell you that story? Because I had a cold. I was terribly sick at the time. And the guy is 85 or something like that. So I was standing next to the guy, and I felt really afraid of talking with that guy. Not just because I was shitting my pants because I was talking to a Nobel Prize winner, but because I thought the guy might catch my cold and then he might die. And then I'm responsible for the death of Thomas Schelling. Yeah? So I was really quiet that time and didn't ask my questions. Besides the fact, I don't know, I always like to talk when I think it helps, or it's a good thing to say something when you have something to say, not just say something for the sake of it. But anyway, it's an interesting Thomas Schelling story that I have. The day I almost killed Thomas Schelling. Yeah. But anyway, so coming back to the segregation process. So now the segregation process, if you remember, it was this thing where I demonstrated to you that kind of when we have, and this is sort of how a lot of this thinking here goes, when we kind of simulate a world where we have hypothetical people, right, and we give them certain rules of behaviors, and then we kind of look at how do they behave when, based on these rules of behaviors, they act and then change the world for others, which then act based on their world with their rules of behaviors and then do something or move and then change the world of others and so on. Yeah? So it's like these chain reactions that can come about. And in this case, I demonstrated you with this website. I don't know if I put the link on Blackboard, but I'm probably going to put the link on Blackboard to this cute little website that I showed you of how these things then actually unfold when we have our individuals, or we call them sometimes agents, when we give them very simple rules. And then the result was that when we gave them a very simple rule, that they look around their immediate neighborhood about the people who are kind of living next to them. So let's assume they live on a spatial grid. And if they simply want to have at least 30% of similar people around them, that means they would be happy with being in the minority. Right? Get that. They would be happy with having more people who are different from them than people who are similar to them. So they are happy to live in the minority. But then what happens is that some people, they kind of reach that threshold where they become unhappy, and then they move elsewhere, and then they kind of might start these chain reactions where they change the world of the location where they left, because now suddenly there's one person left, and that might just bring another individual in that neighborhood over that threshold. They were just happy before, but now they are unhappy, right? And then they might actually move and go somewhere else. So that's one thing. But at the same time, that moving decision of an individual also changes the environment of where that individual ends up in at the end of the day. Because then suddenly there's one individual more. So maybe somebody else would have been happy with how that neighborhood composition looks like, but now this one more person kind of, again, is the top of the iceberg and makes that other person then go. And these are the kind of dynamics that underlie a chain reaction which can then unravel. Yeah? And the chain reaction can unravel even when people are tolerant in general. That means that they would want to live, they would be fine with being in the minority as long as it's not too crazy, as long as there's some people around them who are similar to them. But even that, because of these chain reactions, can lead to almost completely segregated environments. So I would really recommend you to understand the segregation process. Also check out this website that is there, because that's not just important for the exam, but just really important for you to get the whole point of this lecture. Okay, so these are the things that I wanted to revisit. We are running a little bit out of time, but I brought in a quiz with me. Do you want to play this quiz? Are you up for that? Yeah? Okay, let's play this quiz then. Okay, sorry for that, so please sign in again. We're getting there. Don't worry, you can play this then at home as well. You can finish it there. We won't have the time to finish it all. But I put a link on Blackboard so you can actually replay it. Okay, let's get started. Okay, so this is sort of so that you get how it goes. You have the 4 buttons, and you press the right button, and the time is going down. And either I press skip. So in this case, I'm going to press skip now. And then you see the result. So it's 15th of May. 9 May, you better check. Okay, what does analytical sociology try to get away from? Either mindless variable analysis, uninformed economics, complicated nonsense, or political interpretations. Excellent. Well done. So complicated nonsense and mindless variable analysis. Yeah? Political interpretations, that's not the realm of analytical sociology. Uninformed economics, well, it could be, but not really. Actually, the other two, that's sort of what we had in mind here. So what are the solutions of analytical sociology against mumbo-jumbo and variabilities, which basically refer to the last two things that were correct? Either mechanism-based explanations, interpretation and subjectivity, clarity and precision, or a cup of tea. Okay, most of you got that right. Interpretation and subjectivity. No, it's not really subjectivity, it's objectivity that we actually try to achieve here. What is part of the analytical sociology approach? Meso-level incomes, micro-level mechanisms, micro-level outcomes, macro-level outcomes. So it's ultimately about macro-level outcomes, not about micro-level outcomes. Yeah? So we want to explain the macro-level phenomena at the end of the day, something like segregation, something like inequality, something like crime rate, and so on. And we go to that through micro-level mechanisms. Okay, what is part of an explanation? Explanans, explorans, explanandum, explicatum. Okay, explicatum, I just made that up. Yeah? That doesn't exist. It's explanans and explanandum. The one is the one that you want to explain, and the other one is the one that you use to explain it. Which kinds of support does the hypothetico-deductivo model of Elster include? Support from the side, support from above, support from within, support from outside. Okay, I know we might have run out of time on that lecture, but the center of that model is support from the side, support from above, and then there's also support from below. There's no support from within. You can read up on Elster on the chapter that I outlined there. But it's not a key reading. Yeah? I don't think I have it as a key reading. Okay, the Colemans Boat is a sailing boat, a schema to make an interpretation, a schema that links micro and macro level, an ecological fallacy. Okay, an ecological fallacy, well, it's not really the Colemans Boat, is that? But once you understood the Colemans Boat, you also understood an ecological fallacy. Yeah, because then you kind of understand, okay, because people who make an ecological fallacy, they don't distinguish between the macro and the micro. Yeah? And they conclude from macro-level observations directly to other macro-level observations without considering the individuals that are involved. And hopefully that you got that this is sort of a mistake that you can make. So you need to think about the individuals that are involved. So it's a schema that links micro and macro level. That's correct. Agent-based modeling is a way to simulate macro level outcomes, a statistical technique, a way to study independent individuals about fashion. Okay, with this third one, I tricked you a little bit. It's not a way to study independent individuals. That would be, actually, if it would be dependent individuals. Yeah? Independent means they don't depend on each other. They are isolated. But agent-based modeling is exactly about modeling how one behavior affects another behavior, affects another behavior, affects another behavior, and so on. So it's not about studying independent individuals, but it's about studying dependent individuals. So that was a bit of a trick question here. It's not a statistical technique, it's a way to simulate macro level outcomes. The wisdom of the crowd is related to cows, depicts that everybody is clever, only works when people influence each other, does not work when people influence each other. Okay, so we had one paper that I had mentioned, Rauhut and others. I don't think it's on the required reading list, but it's definitely on the further reading list. And I had talked about that at the end of the lecture on wisdom of the crowds and in the context of social influence, that when people start influencing each other, if they start copying what others do, whatever their guess was, then the wisdom of the crowd doesn't work anymore. And why? Because variety gets lost. Okay, what is part of a self-fulfilling prophecy? An originally false belief, an originally true belief, a belief that turns false, a truth that becomes false. And I even written that false. An originally false belief. Okay, I think we're running out of time here. I don't want to push this any further, but I'm going to put the link on Blackboard so you can play that quiz in your preparation for the exam. I wish you all the best for the exam. Good luck with whatever you're doing, and maybe see you in another course. Yeah. Okay. Thanks.